for introduction, after all the effort one has gone to relocate rhinos into a new area, what you want to happen is for them to establish a viable population. And that means that the habitat has to be suitable. And most basically, it has to provide for their food needs. The habitat conditions are quite radically different in the part of KwaZulu in South Africa where I did my rhino study. So what I thought I'd do is just to show you in pictures what those conditions look like and what the implications might be for whether the rhinos you're planning to move to the part of Uganda where they formerly occurred are going to establish a viable population there, recognizing that the habitat conditions today may not be the same as they were back several decades when the last rhinos were there. So I think it's well known that rhinos favor very short grass. They are adapted in their mouthwarts to be able to crop very short grass very effectively down to just a couple of centimeters above soil level. They can graze shorter grass than even wildebeest and other short grass ruminants can graze. They depend upon that because those short grasses are lacking fiber and are highly digestible and therefore supply nutrition which enables the white rhinos to reproduce effectively. In seeking short grass, what the rhinos concentrate on first are the termite mounds, not the very tall mounds that you find quite commonly in parts of Africa, but these low mounds established by termites called odontotermes. And they, because the soils are fertile, clay-rich, they support short grasses locally, even though the surrounding grasses may be taller. And then by grazing the termite mounds and grazing the grass around those termite mounds, they eventually expand the area covered by short grass into where you can get the whole vast area covered with highly nutritious short grasses, looking lovely and green here at the start of the rainy season. Just a few patches of taller grasses in that hollow, and a few acacia trees out in this extensive short grass lawn. Those are the conditions in Umfolozi Game Reserve when the rhinos were thriving and reproducing at the record rate of about 9% per year under those conditions. But of course, during the course of the wet season, when the grasses stop growing, when the dry season starts, there's virtually no grass left. No matter how short the rhinos graze, they've grazed right down to almost soil level. And you can see within that fenced exclosure what the grasses, the height that the grasses would attain if they hadn't been grazed by white rhinos. So they can't survive on these short grass lawns year round. They have to turn to taller grasses and use those as a reserve food source through the passage of the dry season. And here you see the conditions when the rhino population was still growing way back in 1966, moving out into these extensive areas of what we call tall grass, but recognizing that grasses get much taller in parts of Uganda. The grasses here, which is predominantly Thamida triandra red grass, are under a meter tall, unlike what one might have in wetter parts of Africa where the rainfall is higher. The rainfall in Umfolozi Game Reserve, I should mention, is about 600 to 650 millimeters per annum. And then they graze wherever reserves of taller grass occur. They are selective in which taller grasses that they graze. And as you can see, even though this rhino is in an area with medium tall grasses, its grazing level is almost at ground level. So they're picking up patches of shorter grasses within the taller grass areas, and they establish a regional mosaic of areas of short and tall grasses, which they need to cover the full annual cycle, favoring short grasses in the wet season as long as there's enough food left, and then falling back upon taller grasses that are relatively nutritious and enable them to survive through the dry season period when the grasses are no longer regrowing. When I was involved with the relocation of white rhinos to the Garamba Reserve in DRC Congo, to assess whether the habitats were suitable for them. This is the kind of grassland that confronted me. Not grasses that were 1 meter tall, but grasses that were more than 2 meters tall. And the species prevalent in Garamba seem to be the same species listed, I think it was by John McCombie and what I read, of being prevalent in the area where the Adjaga Reserve is situated. 4 grasses of the genera Hyperrhenia and Lauditia, and in places even Imperata. And those fibrous grasses are not digestible and not going to offer much nutrition to support white rhinos. So white rhinos occurred there in the past. Where had they occurred? One factor enabling them to survive in this tall grass area, so rainfall of about 1,500 millimeters per year, the patch mosaic of burns established in managing Garamba National Park. So here you can see that it's been burnt. The area in the foreground has been burnt. There's green leaf there. Because the burn was early, it hasn't spread very far, and there's still areas of taller grass in the background. So that's going to be very important if those conditions also prevail in the Adjaga Reserve in Uganda, to use fires to establish short grasses temporarily to enable the grasses to find some food that wouldn't otherwise be available in the absence of fires and in the absence of prior grazing by white rhinos to cultivate longer lasting short grass areas. And the way one would want to use fire is to establish a mosaic of fires burnt at different periods. So as the burns grow quite rapidly, grasses that would be too tall to favor white rhinos, we have another area that's been burnt later and retains shorter, greener grass. That'll be an important way to manage conditions in the reserve if tall grass is as widely prevalent as I suspect it is, with white rhinos having been absent for many decades. And then within the landscape, you can find areas where shorter grasses naturally prevail. This is around the headwaters of a drainage line, and you'll find localized areas of grasses that are more favorable for white rhinos and other grazers, like species of Brachiaria. So again, the white rhinos to begin with can find these localized patches, and then by concentrating the grazing on them to expand them and create the kind of mosaic of tall and short grass that one wants to prevail to ensure that the rhino population will be viable. Otherwise, you'll face what conditions in Garamba confronted this white rhino.
Like where we are taking the rhino, Ajay actually has the tall grass. And probably now I see that Garamba is a candidate of the same. What would be the advice that would be given so that we can actually make this habitat as suitable for the rhino? Because the moment it's not, then the reproduction rate is going to lower, and probably they will keep moving a lot, and monitoring is going to be difficult. So what is the measure that is required under the circumstance?
The advice I would give to you is the same as the advice that I gave to the people, African parks people managing Garamba, and that's if the inadequate areas of short grass in the landscape in certain localities, you'll need to help the rhinos to generate the short grass patches through rotational burning. Now, you don't want the burn to establish what you saw in that last picture, an area is burnt across the whole landscape, and all that's left is the very stemmy, very brown grass. Those rhinos are not going to survive even if they're fenced in. So one needs to establish early burns where there's still enough water, moisture in the soil to produce a green leaf regrowth after the burn, and rotate those areas to make so that the rhinos at any time over the year will be able to find some relatively short green grass that will not persist as being short because the species involved can grow tall. But after a fire, you can turn Hyperrhenia grasslands into areas that would be nutritionally adequate for rhinos to survive. Your challenge is managing the fires. Okay, so it requires some expertise in fire management, and you might need also to consult with people down here who are quite experienced in fire management.
Thank you, Norman. John, does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, sure. That's okay. But probably what I want to add is it suitable that we can do vegetation enhancement, especially where vegetation has overgrown and the bushes are overtaking the habitat. When we eliminate, can we still like spread grass seeds so that we can actually enhance the generation of young grass that is likely to be eaten by the rhino?
It depends upon whether you already have the right species of grass in the landscape somewhere. I mentioned species of Brachyria because those are the ones that I've found growing near the termite mounds where shorter grasses were prevalent. If the grasses are not growing there naturally, I don't think seeding is going to work very well, because the taller grasses simply shade out the grasses that you want to grow. The rhinos need to keep the areas after the burns short enough for long enough for trees to be there.
Maybe just ask John something.
Yes,
I
sure,
think
Willem.
the habitat is very important because I think it starts raining, if I'm right. The rainy season in Uganda starts now in April. So we will have a lot of green grass growing at the moment, or should grow. I just want to know if it's, if that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, I know we're just going to have a lot of grass, but we also run the risk of regeneration of herbaceous plants. So we lose out on the grass, and then we have so much herbaceous vegetation that possibly the rhino might not prefer. So that's why I'm looking at the option of seeding the habitat so that we can have more grass germinating before the herbaceous vegetation covers up the habitat.
My suggestion is that you consult the people at Gorambo who are in the process of following the advice that I gave to you to find out exactly how they've done it. Dave Cooper, I think, has been up there after the rhinos were brought in, and he might be able to fill you in. I was there in the days when they were planning bringing in the rhinos, and I had to evaluate the habitat as being basically very unsuitable, but in the long run, it could be made suitable. I should pass on to Dave, maybe to add his observations.
Thank you, Norman. That was exactly my suggestion, is to go along and pay a visit there just to see. They've got 16, well, they're now 15 rhino, but just to see what impact those 15 rhino have had on that relatively small area that they were introduced to, which I'm very confident that with time, those 15, especially if there are more rhino available, they will modify that habitat. I've seen the effects on that, probably about a 20-hectare camp, that and they're moving the fence all the time. It's been very, for me, illuminating just to see the way the rhino have been grazing on the short grass, because there was short grass there, but how they've also now moved into the longer grass and actually utilizing it. I'm sort of like, I'm looking forward to going back there, which is hopefully, in about 2 months' time, just to see what impact they have had. So I think, considering that the habitat's likely to be very similar in Uganda, it's definitely worthwhile just to go and spend a day or two, and especially watch how those rhino behave, where they go to, at what time of the day, and what, etc. It's been very, very interesting. And considering those rhino all came from essentially an Umfolozi kind of habitat.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Willem. Thanks, Norman. I'm just going to move on to, we've got 3 participants that have been very patient. So Akarut, would you like to put your question through to Norman? Oh, sorry, Gloria.
Yes, sorry, this is Dr. Masi, part of the team that is with Gloria. My question is probably a continuation of what Mr. Makombo had asked. In the event that pasture is going to be established, what kind of grass or pasture is the best for the rhinos? And how best would it be established without disturbing the other animals in the environment already for Ajai? Thank you.
The grasses that I saw in Garamba were very different from those that I'm experienced with from Amphalosi. So the species that I know were good for rhinos there might be the same as you have in Uganda. But one of them I know occurs up there, and that is a species known as Panicum maximum, if you know the name. It's also cultivated under the name guinea grass. It characteristically grows under tree canopies and remains green longer into the dry season because of the shade there. It's not a short grass, but it's a very leafy grass, and the rhinos favor that.
We had another hand up. It was Vani.
Sorry, I think my question was asked by Dr. Patrick about the feasibility study that we did before. We realized that we have the grass, yes, but maybe my additional question is, can't the rhinos themselves manipulate or lawn the long grass that is already existent? Because when you look at Uganda, due to the soils, the same species of grass in the west or central will grow differently in the north. But I guess just like humans, when you go to a place and find whatever food is there, if it is close to your taste, you try to adopt and table for you. So I would imagine the rhinos will be able to manipulate the grass that they find there as long as it is suitable for them. Thank you.
Yeah, they will start off by picking up the patches where suitable grasses exist, hopefully somewhere in the landscape, and then by grazing around them to expand and generate the long-term mosaic that they need for grass at different times of the year.